The surveillance spouse, I found the hidden camera in our bedroom ceiling while changing a light bulb. A tiny lens, professionally installed, staring down at our bed like a mechanical judge. My hands would and bled as I unscrewed the smoke detector housing, my mind racing through every intimate moment of the past 6 months. Every vulnerable conversation, every private moment, every second I thought was mine alone. My wife of 9 years had been watching me, recording me, studying me like a lab specimen. But the question that made my blood run cold wasn't just why, it was how long and what else had she installed. The camera's memory card held the answer I wasn't prepared for. Hundreds of hours of footage, meticulously organized into folders with clinical labels. Emotional responses, January. Conflict patterns, February. Behavioral deviation markers, March. She'd been conducting a psychological experiment on me, and I was the unknowing subject. If you're into honest stories about relationships, trust, and betrayal, hit that follow button. You won't want to miss the next one. I sat on the edge of our bed, holding this tiny piece of technology that had witnessed everything. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to storm into her home office and demand answers. But something deeper, more calculated, told me to wait. If she'd gone this far without my knowledge, there had to be more. And I needed to understand the full scope of her operation before making a single move. I copied every file to an encrypted drive, then carefully replaced the camera exactly as I'd found it. That night at dinner, I played my role perfectly. Kissed her hello, asked about her book club, laughed at her anecdote about a coworker, all while knowing that somewhere in our house a recording device was capturing my performance. She had no idea I'd discovered her surveillance system, and I intended to keep it that way until I mapped every corner of her deception. The next morning after she left for her morning Pilates class, I began my real investigation. I worked methodically, room by room. The living room smoke detector yielded camera number 2. My home office had camera number 3, hidden inside a decorative succulent on my bookshelf, pointed directly at my desk. The garage held camera 4, positioned to watch my workbench where I spent hours on my woodworking hobby and took most of my private phone calls. But it was her laptop that revealed the truth I wasn't ready for. I'd known her password for years. She'd never changed it, never thought she needed privacy from me, or so I'd believed. Her browser history led me down a rabbit hole that made the cameras seem almost innocent by comparison. The forum was called the Optimization Project. Hundreds of women, maybe thousands, all conducting similar surveillance operations on their husbands and partners. They shared tactics, compared behavioral modification results, and celebrated victories when their men changed behaviors without understanding why. My wife wasn't just spying on me, she was part of a network, and I was her case study. I scrolled through her posts, each one a knife to the gut. Day 47, subject still leaves dishes in the sink despite subtle environmental cues. Trying new approach-leaving psychology articles about household equity on coffee table. Monitoring response patterns. Day 89, caught subject watching sports instead of engaging with book club discussion I prepared. Implemented strategic emotional withdrawal. Subject apologized within 6 hours without understanding the trigger. Success rate improving. Day 134, major breakthrough. Subject now asks permission before making plans with friends. 3 months of coordinated response patterns have established new neural pathways. The conditioning is holding beautifully. Day 178, subject's autonomy indicators declining as predicted. Self-initiated activities down 67% from baseline. Compliance metrics exceeding projections. Ready to move to phase 2, financial restructuring. She'd been engineering my behavior for 6 months, and I hadn't even noticed. Every argument that seemed to come from nowhere. Every cold shoulder I couldn't explain. Every time she'd praise me for something that felt oddly specific, it was all coordinated, calculated, part of her experiment. But phase 2 stopped me cold. Financial restructuring. I clicked through to a document titled Asset Consolidation Strategy. My stomach dropped as I read her plan to slowly transfer joint assets into accounts controlled solely by her, to position herself for what she called optimal outcome scenarios in the event of subject noncompliance or relationship dissolution. She wasn't just manipulating me, she was preparing to financially destroy me if I ever figured it out. I spent the next hour downloading everything, every post, every document, every instructional guide from the forum. The methodology was sophisticated, almost clinical. There were modules on breaking down male resistance, establishing dependency patterns, and exit strategy planning. This wasn't a support group for struggling wives. This was a systematic approach to psychological control. One document caught my attention: the Husband Improvement Initiative, Advanced Protocols. It outlined a 12-month program where women would enroll their partners in a various self-improvement schemes while simultaneously conducting hidden surveillance. The goal wasn't actually improvement. It was control through the illusion of consent. I sat back in her chair, my mind racing. She would be home in an hour. I needed to decide my next move, and I needed to decide fast. Confrontation would tip my hand before I understood the full extent of her network or her plans. But playing ignorant while she escalated to phase two could be dangerous. Then I saw the calendar reminder pop up on her screen. IHI conference, next Saturday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., Marriott downtown. I clicked through. The Husband Improvement Initiative was hosting its annual gathering. Speakers included psychologists, relationship coaches, and women sharing their success stories. My wife was listed as a panelist. Case study presentation, long-term behavioral modification in resistant subjects. I was her conference presentation, her success story, her proof of concept. Something clicked in my mind. She wanted to present her research on me. Fine, I would give her a case study she'd never forget. But I wouldn't be the subject. I'd be the researcher turning the tables on the entire operation. I closed her laptop exactly as I'd found it and went to my home office. I had 6 days to prepare for that conference, and I was going to use every single hour. First call went to a lawyer who specialized in surveillance and privacy law. Second call went to a private investigator I'd used for background checks in my business. Third call went to a tech consultant who could help me understand exactly what kind of surveillance I was dealing with and how to use it to my advantage. By the time my wife returned home, I was in the garage, calmly working on a chair I'd been building. She poked her head in, smiled warmly, and asked if I wanted tea. I said yes, returned her smile, and went back to my woodwork. Just another day in our perfect little life. Just another moment captured on her hidden cameras, showing her exactly what she wanted to see: a compliant, unsuspecting husband. That evening, I found the remaining cameras. One in the kitchen, cleverly disguised as a phone charger on the counter. Another in our home gym, built into what looked like a motivational speaker. Even one outside, hidden in the porch light, watching our front door. 7 cameras total, creating a comprehensive surveillance net over my entire life. But I also found something else: a voice-activated recorder hidden inside the heating vent in our bedroom. She wasn't just watching. She was listening to every conversation I had, every phone call I made from the privacy of our room. The violation felt complete, suffocating. I didn't remove any of them. Instead, I began using them. Every moment I was in view of a camera, I played my part perfectly. The loving husband, growing slightly more attentive, asking her opinion on small decisions, showing just enough change to suggest her methods were working. But in the gaps, in the moments when I left the house or was genuinely alone, I was planning. The private investigator's report came back in 3 days. My wife had been attending these Pilates classes for 8 months. They weren't exercise sessions. They were strategy meetings for the optimization project. 12 women from our area, all married, all conducting similar operations on their partners. They met twice weekly to share updates, troubleshoot resistance, and plan their next phases. The lawyer's assessment was even more valuable. In our state, the surveillance my wife was conducting fell into a legal gray area. Hidden cameras in shared spaces of a home occupied by both parties weren't clearly illegal, but the recordings could be contested in court. However, if I could prove systematic psychological manipulation combined with plans for financial harm, I had grounds for fault-based divorce and possibly even legal action against her. But I didn't want just a divorce. I wanted justice. And I wanted to expose the entire network. The tech consultant swept our house and found 3 devices I'd missed: a keylogger on my personal laptop, spyware on my phone that tracked my location and copied my messages, and a modified router that logged every website I visited. She compromised every aspect of my digital life. But once I knew they were there, I could use them to feed her false information. I started my counter-operation. On my compromised phone, I searched for local therapists, making her think I was considering counseling on my own. I visited websites about being a better husband, improving communication, and understanding women's emotional needs. Every search was designed to make her think her program was working beautifully, that I was becoming aware of my supposed flaws and actively trying to fix them. Meanwhile, on a burner phone the tech consultant had given me, I was coordinating something much bigger. I'd found the contact information for 3 other husbands whose wives were part of my wife's local group. The private investigator had identified them through social media cross-referencing and surveillance of the meeting location. I reached out to each one carefully, using encrypted messaging apps, asking if they'd noticed anything strange in their marriages lately. Unexplained personality changes in themselves, a feeling of being watched, arguments that seemed to come from nowhere. 2 of them responded within hours. Their messages were almost identical. I thought I was going crazy. We arranged to meet in person, somewhere far from our neighborhood, with no phones that could be tracked. A diner 3 towns over, late at night, after our wives thought we were asleep. I arrived first and took a corner booth with a view of the entrance. Mark came in first, a guy about my age, IT professional, looked exhausted. Then David, older, quiet, with the kind of weariness that comes from years of something grinding you down. I'd brought printouts of everything I'd found on my wife's laptop, carefully edited to protect my identity while showing them the proof they needed. My name doesn't matter, I started. What matters is that you're not crazy. You're not imagining things. And you're not alone. I showed them the forum posts, the surveillance tactics, the behavioral modification protocols. I watched their faces transform from confusion to recognition to rage. Mark started crying. David just sat there stone-faced, methodically reading every page. "How long?" Mark finally asked. "How long has this been happening to me?" "Based on the patterns I've seen," I said, "probably a year, maybe more. They start slow, tiny changes you barely notice, then gradually ramp up as they establish control." David looked up. "My wife has been suggesting I see a therapist for my anger issues. But I'm not angry. At least I wasn't before all this." "That's part of it," I explained. "They pathologize normal male behavior, create problems that don't exist, then position themselves as the solution. Meanwhile, they're documenting everything, building a case against you in case you ever push back or try to leave." "So what do we do?" Mark asked. "Confront them?" "No," I said. "We expose them. All of them. Next Saturday, there's a conference, the Husband Improvement Initiative annual gathering. Your wives will be there, along with hundreds of others. They're going to be presenting their success stories, teaching their methods to new recruits." "And," David prompted, "and we're going to be there too, not to disrupt, but to document, to gather evidence. And then we're going to contact every husband, every partner of every woman in that organization, and we're going to show them what's really happening." We talked for 3 more hours, planning every detail. Mark had access to his wife's email and could get us the full conference details. David worked in video production and had equipment we could use. I had the legal framework and the evidence. Together, we had everything we needed. Over the next 3 days, our group expanded. Mark contacted another husband from his wife's group. That man contacted 2 more. By Friday night, we had 9 men, all with the same story, all ready to take back control of their lives. We called ourselves the Accountability Project. No manifestos, no ideology, just men who refused to be treated as experiments. Saturday morning arrived. My wife woke up early, excited about her presentation. She'd been practicing her talking points all week, rehearsing how she'd describe my transformation, the techniques she'd used, the resistance she'd overcome. I made her breakfast, wished her luck, and told her I'd probably spend the day working in the garage. She kissed my cheek, gathered her presentation materials, and drove off to showcase her success story. 30 minutes later, I was in my car, heading to the same hotel. The other men met me in the parking garage. David had 4 small cameras that could be attached to clothing, invisible unless you were looking for them. We also had audio recorders and a plan to position ourselves throughout the conference center where we could capture everything. The registration desk was our first test. Mark walked up confidently and gave a fake name, claiming he was a journalist writing a piece on modern relationships. They gave him a press badge and a full schedule. The rest of us got in through various methods. I claimed to be a psychologist interested in their methodology. David said he was a documentary filmmaker. One by one, we infiltrated their conference. The main ballroom was packed. At least 300 women, maybe more. The energy was electric, almost evangelical. They weren't just sharing tips. They were celebrating victories, comparing notes like coaches discussing their players. The opening speaker was a psychologist named Dr. Patricia Hendricks, who presented on breaking through male emotional resistance. Her slides were horrifying. She advocated for systematic emotional manipulation, creating controlled crises to make men feel unstable, then positioning yourself as their anchor. She called it strategic destabilization and presented it as a pathway to better relationships. The audience ate it up, taking notes frantically. I recorded every word. My wife's panel came right before lunch. Long-term behavioral modification, case studies from the field. 3 women sat at a table on stage, my wife in the center. She looked confident, professional, absolutely certain of her righteousness. The moderator introduced her first. Sarah has been working with a particularly resistant subject for 9 months, and her results have been nothing short of remarkable. Sarah, can you walk us through your approach? My wife smiled and launched into her presentation. She described me without using my name. Subject A, she called me. She outlined how stubborn I'd been, how focused on my own interests, how I'd needed comprehensive intervention. She showed graphs of my behavioral changes, metrics she'd tracked through her surveillance, my autonomous activities declining, my approval-seeking behaviors increasing, my compliance rate going up month by month. She talked about me like I was a project she'd successfully completed. The key breakthrough, she explained, came when I implemented comprehensive monitoring. You can't modify behavior you can't measure. I installed visual and audio surveillance throughout our shared spaces, which allowed me to identify patterns he wasn't even aware of. Once I understood his triggers, I could create controlled situations that would naturally lead him toward better responses. The audience nodded along. Several women raised their hands with questions. Not a single person questioned the ethics of what she was describing. They only wanted to know her techniques, her tools, her secrets to success. I felt David tense beside me. Mark had gone pale. We were all hearing the same thing. These women genuinely believed they were helping their husbands. They'd convinced themselves that manipulation was love, that control was care, that erasing a person's autonomy was somehow bringing couples closer together. During the Q&A, one woman asked, "What do you do if the subject becomes aware of the monitoring?" My wife didn't hesitate. Ideally, he never finds out. But if he does, you have 2 options. If the relationship is salvageable and he's shown significant improvement, you can frame it as concern for the marriage, as trying to understand him better. Most men will accept this if they're sufficiently conditioned. If he reacts with hostility or attempts to leave, that's when you activate your exit strategy. You should always have documentation showing his problematic behaviors, financial plans that protect your assets, and if necessary, a narrative that positions you as the victim of his instability. She said it so casually, like she was giving advice on meal planning. Destroy a man's life if he dares to object to being controlled. The room applauded. That was the moment I knew I had to do more than just leave. These women were spreading this methodology, teaching it to others, building an entire movement around psychological abuse disguised as relationship improvement. And they were doing it with confidence because nobody was pushing back, nobody was exposing them, nobody was holding them accountable. After my wife's panel, we reconvened in David's hotel room. We had hours of footage, dozens of recordings, documented proof of what the optimization project really was. The question was what to do with it. We could go to the media, Mark suggested. Show them what's happening. They'd bury it, David countered. Or spin it as disgruntled husbands attacking women's empowerment. Then we go to the husbands directly, I said. Every man who came here with a wife today is being manipulated. They just don't know it yet. We tell them. We show them. We give them the same choice we had, accept the truth and decide what to do with it. We spent the rest of the afternoon compiling everything into a comprehensive presentation. Videos, forum screenshots, methodology documents, everything. Then we created a simple website, theaccountabilityproject.org. No manifestos, no rants, just evidence and resources. Legal advice, tech security tips, support group information, contact details for lawyers who specialized in these cases. The conference ended at 4 p.m. We waited in the parking garage, watching the attendees return to their cars. When we saw a woman walking with her husband, one of us would approach the man carefully, hand him a card with our website URL, and say simply, "Check this out. You deserve to know the truth." Some men threw the cards away immediately. Others looked confused but pocketed them. A few looked at the URL, looked at their wives, and something changed in their eyes. Recognition, suspicion, the first crack in the conditioning. I waited for my wife to appear. When she finally came out, laughing with two of her panelist friends, I stayed hidden. This wasn't the time for confrontation. I had too much left to do. I drove home, got there an hour before she would, and prepared the final phase of my plan. I'd already moved most of my important possessions to a storage unit. My finances were separated and protected. My lawyer had the divorce papers ready. All that remained was the confrontation, and I was going to make it count. When she got home, glowing from her successful presentation, I was sitting in the living room with her laptop open on the coffee table. The surveillance footage was paused on the screen, showing our bedroom from the ceiling camera's perspective. She froze in the doorway. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "How long have you known?" she finally asked, her voice barely steady. "Long enough," I replied. "Long enough to document everything. Long enough to understand exactly what you've been doing. Long enough to plan my response." She tried to pivot to defense. "You went through my private computer? That's a violation of—" "Don't," I cut her off. "Don't you dare talk to me about violations. You've been recording me for 9 months. Every private moment, every conversation, every second of my life has been your research project. You don't get to claim privacy now." Her expression shifted, calculating. I could see her running through her training, trying to find the right response to regain control. I was trying to help us. Our marriage was struggling, and I needed to understand why. If you'd just been willing to communicate, our marriage was fine until you decided I needed to be fixed, I said. You created problems that didn't exist so you could position yourself as the solution. It's all in your forum posts, Sarah. I've read everything. Subject A has been very educational. Her face went white. She knew she was caught, but she wasn't ready to surrender. "What do you want? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry, I went too far. Can we move past this and work on our relationship for real this time?" "I don't want an apology," I said. "I want you to understand that what you did is unforgivable. You didn't just spy on me. You tried to reprogram me. You measured my compliance like I was a dog being trained. You planned to destroy me financially if I ever pushed back. And you stood in front of hundreds of women today and taught them how to do the same thing to their partners." I pulled out the divorce papers and placed them on top of her laptop. "I'm leaving tonight. You'll be served officially on Monday, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. I've documented everything, the surveillance, the manipulation, the financial planning, all of it. You have two choices. You can sign these papers, accept a fair but firm division of assets, and we can both move on quietly. Or you can fight it, and I'll make every piece of evidence public. Your family will know. Your friends will know. The women in your group will know that Subject A figured it out and burned down your entire operation. You can't do that, she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. It would destroy me. You were prepared to destroy me, I replied. You said it yourself during your panel. Activate your exit strategy, position yourself as the victim. You had a whole plan for how to ruin my life if I objected to being controlled. So yes, I can do this. The question is whether I need to. She sank onto the couch, the reality finally hitting her. This is really it? 9 years together? And you're just done? You ended our marriage the day you installed the first camera, I said. I'm just making it official. She signed the papers that night, her hand shaking. No fight, no argument, just her signature acknowledging that it was over. I left with my pre-packed bags, drove to my new apartment across town, and spent my first night of freedom in years. The website went live the next morning. Within 24 hours, we had 5,000 visitors. By the end of the week, more than 50,000. Men from across the country were contacting us, sharing their own stories of manipulation, surveillance, and control. Some of them recognized tactics from their own relationships. Others were horrified to realize they'd been living through the same systematic abuse. But something unexpected happened. Women started contacting us too. Not to attack or defend the optimization project, but to say they'd been manipulated by similar male-led groups, or that they'd recognized controlling behaviors in their own relationships and wanted to do better. The conversation expanded beyond gender. It became about respect, autonomy, and the difference between healthy relationships and systematic control. The Accountability Project became a movement. We started support groups, created resources, connected people with lawyers and therapists who understood psychological manipulation. Within 3 months, we'd helped more than 200 people leave abusive relationships or renegotiate them on healthier terms. The Optimization Project tried to fight back. They claimed that we were doxing innocent women, that we were bitter men attacking female empowerment. But the evidence was overwhelming. When you show people hours of conference footage where women casually discuss installing hidden cameras, tracking their partner's every move, and strategically manipulating their emotions, the truth becomes undeniable. Dr. Patricia Hendricks lost her psychology license. The hotel chain that hosted the conference faced public backlash and issued a statement condemning manipulation disguised as relationship advice. Several women from the forum faced legal consequences when their husbands discovered the surveillance and filed suit. As for my ex-wife, the divorce was finalized in 6 months. She moved to a different state, changed her social media presence, and tried to start over. I don't track her, don't follow her, don't care what she does now. She's irrelevant to my life, which is exactly how it should be. A year after I discovered that first camera, I met someone new. Not through trying, not through some elaborate plan, just through living my life authentically. Her name is Rachel, and when we first started dating, I was honest about everything that had happened. I showed her the Accountability Project website, explained my history, and told her I needed absolute transparency and respect in any relationship I was part of. She didn't run, she didn't judge. She said, "That sounds horrible, and you deserve better. Let's make sure we build something different together." We've been together 8 months now, and there are no hidden cameras, no surveillance, no manipulation. Just two people choosing each other every day, respecting boundaries, communicating honestly. It's shockingly simple when both people see each other as equals rather than as projects to be fixed. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how I handled things with my ex-wife, if I wish I'd tried counseling or given her another chance. The answer is no, not for a second. She didn't make a mistake or have a lapse in judgment. She implemented a comprehensive, calculated plan to control every aspect of my behavior without my knowledge or consent. That's not something you come back from. That's not something you fix with a few therapy sessions. What she did was abuse, plain and simple. And the scariest part was how normal it seemed to her and everyone in her group. They'd convinced themselves that love justified control, that improving someone meant erasing their autonomy, that you could manipulate someone for their own good. The Accountability Project continues to grow. We've expanded to 12 cities, run weekly support groups, and maintain a legal fund to help people escape manipulative relationships. We're not anti-marriage or anti-relationship. We're pro-dignity, pro-autonomy, pro-respect, because that's what it comes down to. You can't build a healthy relationship on surveillance and manipulation. You can't love someone while simultaneously conducting behavioral experiments on them. You can't claim to want a partner while treating them like a subject to be studied and corrected. Real love respects boundaries. Real love trusts. Real love sees the person you're with as fundamentally worthy, not fundamentally flawed. My ex-wife taught me that lesson the hard way, but I learned it, I survived it, and now I'm using that knowledge to help others who are living through the same nightmare I escaped. Sometimes the best response to someone trying to control your life isn't anger or revenge. It's simply refusing to be controlled, exposing the truth, and building something better in its place. That's exactly what I did, and I've never looked back. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, subscribe to our channel. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.